There are simple fundamentals to understanding things that exist amongst us. And a lot of times we look at those things as being connected to a system that someone else created, when really they're things that are quite natural. And I want to talk about this a bit in the A's and C's of artists and creatives. Peace, my name is Stacy Patrice. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Always glad to have you. I want to take a moment here to play something for you that was something I woke up, a transmission. I record my transmissions when I rise because sometimes they move very quickly through me and they kind of start my day. But I always need to understand, like, what was the origin point? Where did this come from? So I want to play you something that came up for me. The one thing that's so important to know is that a lot of times artists are judged by the rules and constructs of creatives. In other words, the way in which we approach our art is through our lives. Our lives are art. And then everything we produce from that life are works of art. The reason this is important for me to include is because once upon a time, there was this idea that artists were a particular part of society. Artists were perhaps people of a particular pay grade, people of a particular lineage. And artists were also people who didn't exist or interface with the rest of society. Maybe they had a particular place where they lived or existed, but also that art was a non-typical thing. It was almost a thing that belonged to a strange aspect of nature, I'll just say. We'll talk about that in another video. But a strange aspect of nature, meaning that a person who is an artist is by no means typical to the rest of society. And people that are artists, or in my estimation, that are creatives, are people who, are see things differently and potentially can be menaces to society, potentially can be a threat because the rest of society functions in a particular way. And then here come these thinkers that have other ways of seeing things and other ways of understanding things, which makes there some kind of rub between the rest of society and those who have those thoughts. And so the idea usually is when people think of artists, they think of people in isolation, people who are not a part of the rest of society, and people who particularly have different ideas and philosophies about society to the point where they should be in their own group or off on their own. And we only call them in when we need something from them. When we need them to create something, then they're valuable. We call them in. But for everything else, we call them out. We push them out, right? And that is still very prevalent today. It is still very obvious today. People think of artists, in my experience, in the same way that people think about astrologers. It's like there's some novelty to what it is that is being done. It's novel, it's fun, it's cool to look at, it's cool to talk about, it's cool to get, your chart read. That's cool. But people aren't thinking about the fact that there are actually people who have to stand in their integrity and make sure that they're not offering something like that unless it's something that they actually are connected to in a real way. It's not just anyone just picking up something and saying, oh, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to try this. And this is where we have a divide between artists and creatives. Creatives can pick up whatever they like. Creatives can say, oh, I just love putting things together. I love making things happen. I love doing this. I love doing that. Oh, that looks fun. I'm going to try that. And if you're creative, you can do that endlessly. You can just always create. It means that you're willing to show up for something and be present with it and make something from it. That's what a creative is. A creative doesn't have to have any particular connection, lineage, skill, philosophy, nothing. A creative can just pick up something and decide that by the very act of them touching something, something new or something is created. It could be a duplicate even. It doesn't have to be original. It doesn't have to be theirs. A creative is a person who creates, right? Then you have an artist, and an artist is a person that is moving through a particular process, a philosophy, a lens. They have some connection to what is being creative. So they are also creatives, but they are creatives on another level. And artists are people who actually live their creations. Their creations are born from their living. They are connected to it. Who they are is inside of it. It is not separate from them. You cannot separate an artist's life and say, okay, this is the artist, but I just like their creations. You can do that, but it doesn't mean that they aren't connected. Usually, what you like about their creations comes from what it is about their life that appeals to you or that resonates with you. And that artist in particular is creating from the source material that is their life, right? So you don't have a person just, picking up things and putting them down or creating things. That's not, they might have their own things they do that with, but it's not necessarily just this idea that there are things that they can do and they can just pick them up and put them down and be done with it. There's usually a long line or a stretch of um, idea or a concept that is connecting everything. There's a connectivity that comes with artists that I think is overlooked. And so while that artist is cranking out things that you love and you may want duplicates or you may want prices or you may want more, you may want them to commodify and make it available for everyone. What you forget is that that artist cannot do that to the degree that they still have to live the life that is creating the art. So what we are talking about is these are things that the artist says, okay, I'm going to put these out, produce these, and move these forward for the benefit of others. But I still have to live this life for the benefit of myself, which also helps others. It's like there's no separation, there's no compartmentalization. It's all connected, all holistic, all continuous. And so asking an artist to like be a creative or move like a creative or a creator solely, or even just a curator is wild because it just shows as a fundamental misunderstanding of how artists move. Now, here's the other part of it. There are a lot of things, and I said some more on this recording, so let me play a little bit more. Creatives, on the other hand, are moving from a colonial perspective of how to crank something out, how to produce, how to make something into being. It's where we learned how to do that for capital. So it's not a natural process. But I think people who are creative or people who understand creativity have a lot to understand about artists. And it's really connected to authenticity. A for authenticity, C. So that A for authenticity and that connectivity is what I'm speaking of, right? So you're never going to see an artist who is creating something that is not somehow displayed in what it is that is happening in their lives. As a matter of fact, artists are very notoriously known, notorious for creating things off of inspiration in moments and events in life. So for instance, you'll see many artists that create life circumstances that are wild so that they have creative material and reference, right? So it's not just about the telling of a story. You can, tell a story, but a lot of times artists have stories that are happening in their lives, like storylines that are happening and may continue to happen, and they're creating from that. So when their storylines change, when their lives change, when they make a shift, when they do something for the better, when they move to a new place, when they experience a life event, this is often a time where they are channeling what is happening through the art. And that is not necessarily what is happening with the creative. A creative can be like a person who works in an agency and they are given direction of what to do or what the final something is supposed to be based on someone's an idea. And then that person can just say, oh, I'm going to go ahead and create it. And you think about that from the standpoint of like it's an assignment, but it's not the assignment necessarily, right? It's a helpful service. It's an ability to understand, so it's still valuable, but it may not be the assignment, the calling, the reason that that person is here. And so I take us back to that idea of artists back in time being separate from society in the sense that they have to live the life that they are here to live. Now, if that is true, then my question to you is, how do we keep artists authentic? What is the thing that needs to happen to keep true artists authentic? Meaning that the life that they're living that produces the things that we find phenomenal, how do we find a way to continue to support that? Because the commodification and the colonial structures of creation are not natural to the artist, even if they are natural to creatives. Artists are more indebted to authenticity and creating things that have authenticity or from authenticity. There is a certain ability for an artist to be authentic that is not necessarily shared with the rest of society. It is like the gold star of authenticity is to produce what is already inside and make it solid, make it tangible. Whereas creatives are really great at commodification, capital, these things. Creatives are great at knowing, like, oh, I can produce this X amount of times and it will yield this, or I can put this tag on that, or this is worth this in the marketplace. This is the kind of capital that this produces. So I think artists and creatives actually need each other. And I think we should also be able to differentiate the difference between a pure creative and a pure artist. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think people need to ask themselves, why is it wrong for an artist to be an artist if it's okay for a creative to be a creative? And that is where this topic started downloading on me, this rising, is because as an artist and a person who's known herself as an artist since she was 5 years old, I don't care what I'm doing. And I can do all of them well because I'm an artist. It comes from my life. It comes from an authentic place. So I will move and change and shift because that's how fast my life is moving. If you want me to stay in one place for longer than I'm supposed to be there, then there's a misunderstanding or a disrespect of, a dishonoring of, a suppression of the idea that life is moving much more quickly than what other people want me to move through. And so sometimes when you see an artist changing lanes and, constantly doing different things and it's connected to their lives, this truly is the art. Their life is the one art to focus on. It's not the medium, it's their lifestyle is the art to focus on. And that lifestyle goes through many changes, goes through many things, and is connected to all of the different ways in which they understand not just themselves, but the connections to all the other things in life. And this is the reason why my astrology practice, my illustration practice, my photography practice, my filmmaking practice, my healing practice, all of these things come out in different art forms. Right, when I was modeling, when I was creative directing, when I was instructing and teaching and educating, all of these things, they come out in these different forms because that is life. And if life is not happening and it's not rich, which tends to happen when a person is, tight on money, the qualities are not necessarily peak. And then we get a whole bunch of gutter art. We get like real gutter, low down, grimy art. And people always are thinking like, I don't really know if I want to touch that. But hey, you might want to support that so that artists can get out of that and move into the higher expressions of what there is to offer. And I learned that through healing art. I learned that the healing art brings the expression to a more divine level. So it's important for artists to have healing art because it is something that allows every artist to experience the higher vibrations of what it is that is possible. And you want that artist to go through that experience as well. You don't just want, you know, 15, my life albums, right? It's good, but you get to a point where you're like, I need more than a my life album. I need more than the sorrow and the pain and the hurt. I felt all of that, but now I actually want some light. I want some things that can uplift. I want to move into deeper understandings, higher realms, bigger feelings, deeper connections, more cosmic consciousness, and so that happens when an artist has space to breathe and to live. And this is very different because you don't want that person going to work a job. I don't care if you say, oh, it would be good for their money. It changes. Remember, the artist is connected to the environment. So when an artist has to have a job and they don't know how to disconnect or compartmentalize between who they are and what it is that they do, then we get the art filtered through that artist's job. And so the goal is to have artists be artists and be paid for what it is that they naturally do, what they love to do, and what we love to see from them. That's what we want. That's what we want. So, what does that look like in society? I want you all to make a comment. Let me know if you are an artist or if you are not an artist, if you agree or do not agree with what I'm saying. I would love to hear what you have to say in the comments because this download came down on me so strong because I've been feeling this for years. But whenever I have an opportunity to articulate, I want whatever it is that's downloading to me to come through me so that I can articulate it and take that opportunity to share with people what it really is that maybe is in the recesses of this artist's mind. Maybe I'm preoccupied with quietly offline and away from people, but I know that there are other artists that feel what I'm talking about. I know there are creatives that don't understand the difference and feel like it is the same and don't understand the distinction. I know there are artists that don't understand the distinction. And I also know there are people who sponsor or who hire creatives and artists and don't understand the distinction. And I think the distinction is the freedom and the connection that an artist feels is critical to the works that the artist produce and every stop and milestone along the journey. And many of those are beneficial to the rest of society if we allow space to move out of the way and let the artist do what they do. Thank you so much for listening. Like, share, comment, and definitely subscribe if you have not already. And I'll see you on the next video. Peace.